Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday morning, December 13th. A lot to talk about this morning. We have a major storm system right now that is impacting a wide part of the nation. It looks like there'll be blizzard conditions throughout the day today across the northern plains, Nebraska, the Dakotas. That blizzard will work its way into Minnesota and then the northern half of Wisconsin over the next 12 to 24 hours or so. Meanwhile, in the storm's warm sector, already an outbreak of some severe thunderstorms down across Texas and Oklahoma, and that severe weather threat area will shift to the east into the lower Mississippi Valley, the Tennessee Valley later today, into tonight, and even into the day on Wednesday. Ultimately, that initial primary surface low will stall out and weaken over the western Great Lakes as it runs into a blocking pattern over Canada. A secondary system will form near the eastern seaboard by the time we get to Thursday, and that'll intensify over the Delmarva Peninsula and spread a lot of precipitation into the mid-Atlantic region and the northeast U.S. Thursday night into the early part of Friday, and certainly can be a wintry mix in places like D.C. and Philadelphia early on Thursday, maybe even an icy mess in D.C., for example, just in time for the morning commute. We'll focus in on those details over the next several minutes. Let's kind of look ahead through this week and into next week in terms of the 850 millibar temperature anomalies. I'm using the ensemble run of the GFS from 0Z last night. Now, ensemble run features many different individual members that have slightly different initial conditions. Maybe one is a little bit more moist, another is a little bit drier, one is a little bit warmer, one's a little bit colder, and by running a whole series of these slightly varying initial conditions, it can give some confidence or maybe some lack of confidence in an operational version of the GFS model or any model. The European has ensemble runs as well. In other words, the operational run at 0Z and 12Z and 6Z and 18Z, if you look at a 5-day forecast, let's say, and the ensemble run matches that closely, then you have a pretty high confidence in that operational forecast. But if there's big differences in the ensemble run, let's say 3, 4, 5 days out, and the operational run, then take that operational forecast with a little bit of salt, because things could change over the next couple of model runs. So again, we're looking at the ensemble run from 0Z last night. Warmer than normal conditions right as we begin the day here on Tuesday across the heartland and into the middle part of Canada. Colder than normal along the northeast U.S. coastline and out across the west. Now let's move forward here. We've talked about how Europe has really gone into the deep freeze from places like the United Kingdom on the west all the way to Scandinavian countries on the east down to France and Germany. Very, very cold for this time of the year. Even some unusual snow in places like London. It's pretty rare to get snow in the first half of the month of December in London. They've cooled down dramatically. Sometimes this time of the year that is a foreshadowing of events in the U.S. Indeed, it looks like they've cooled down already across Europe and parts of Asia as well, like Russia and Siberia for sure in the deep freeze. Looks like an Arctic invasion is on the way to the U.S. later next week. Let's move forward here. We'll certainly see that up ahead here in the forecast. Now we're going into the latter part of the work week. This is when a storm system will ride up along the northeast U.S. coastline, and colder air already encompassing much of the nation as we end the work week here. But look at this air mass right here. We've talked in recent days about a cross-polar flow. That means some air from the other side of the North Pole makes it to this side of the North Pole, the North American side, and indeed this has the earmarks of cross-polar flow dropping from way up over the polar region, maybe even the other side of the pole, into western Canada by the weekend. And take a look at what happens here as we get into the end of the week. And this is some brutally cold air. You're looking at comparisons to normal, some 20 to 25 degrees below normal. When you're in the latter part of December, that's awfully cold air. And again, remember, this is an ensemble run here, so ensemble runs tend to smooth things out with time. In other words, a very strong ridge initially may look like just a strong ridge 5 days out or 10 days out. Very cold air mass initially will kind of not look quite as dramatically cold 5-10 days out. So for this to look this cold all the way out to Sunday, that's this Sunday the 18th, this is very impressive cold air. And watch what happens here. It just kind of slides slowly to the south and east, and by the time we get to about a week from now, next Tuesday, it's very cold, extending from the west coast of Canada, the northwest coast of the U.S., all the way across the nation, with the core of the coldest air relative to normal up across Montana, the Dakotas. Some of these areas, Montana, North Dakota, for example, could see 3-4 days in a row of temperatures no better than zero in some of those localities up across, again, Montana and the Dakotas. Let's go out a little bit farther in time and look at this. Dives all the way down to the south, so you could have a brutal Arctic invasion from the northern plains all the way down into Texas later next week, and that works its way into the eastern part of the nation. Here we go by a week and a half from now, Saturday the 24th, Christmas Eve. The core of that coldest air now sliding into the eastern half of the nation just in time for Christmas. This is actually Christmas Day, and again, this is way out there, 300 hours out there for an ensemble forecast to look this cold this far out is very impressive indeed. The much of the nation, but especially the eastern 2/3 of the nation, in the deep freeze by the time we get to the end of next week into the Christmas weekend. Again, this is the forecast map for Sunday, December 25th, Christmas Day. Well, now let's take a look at the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps, again using the ensemble run of the GFS from 0Z last night. Notice, first of all, very strong ridge here over the Hudson Bay, centered over the Hudson Bay region of Canada. That's an important player here for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic region for later this week, because this kind of an omega block, we call it, with the upper air pattern in the shape of the Greek letter omega, as we see right here. If you follow these lines here, this takes on the shape of the Greek letter omega. This is what we call an omega block. Very slow moving systems and oftentimes very strong systems. This is a strong ridge of high pressure centered over the Hudson Bay region. It's an important player because that will supply some low level cold air for the Northeast, for the Mid-Atlantic region on Thursday night. But by the time this system spawns another secondary low along the eastern seaboard on Thursday, in other words, there'll be a lot of cold air around. That's why we expect perhaps an icy mess in D.C. at the onset of this storm. Even Philadelphia on Thursday morning could see a wintry mix with this cold, low-level air in place, and certainly upstate Pennsylvania, upstate New York can have some significant accumulating snow in this particular late week event, Thursday night time frame. Again, partly, or mainly as a result of this very cold Arctic air that will be in place thanks to that ridge of high pressure over Canada, northern Canada. And let's move forward here. And again, we have severe weather already this morning breaking out in Texas, Oklahoma. That clash between the colder air to the west and the warmer air to the east already producing some severe thunderstorms. Meanwhile, very heavy snow breaking out across Nebraska will work its way up through the Dakotas, eventually into Minnesota and the northern half of Wisconsin over the next 24 to 48 hours or so. Here we go now by midweek. This is Wednesday, and this upper level low kind of slides to the north and east and runs into this tremendous block here over the Hudson Bay region of Canada. Again, that is where high pressure exists and supplying cold air in place for the Mid-Atlantic, for the Northeast U.S. as this next storm system arrives later in the week. And because of this high latitude blocking, the surface low, the initial primary surface low, will kind of grind to a halt over the upper Midwest, the western Great Lakes, and it will start to weaken, and a secondary system will form along the eastern seaboard, intensify over the Delmarva Peninsula, and then move up to the north and east later in the weekend. Here we go. By the time we get to the early part of the weekend, very widespread area below normal heights as that colder air mass follows the late week storm system into the northeastern quadrant of the nation, and will move forward here. And this is signs of that next very, very cold air mass and upper level low kind of dominating the scene across the U.S. here by the time we get to the middle and latter part of next week. If this kind of pattern indeed forms later next week, that will raise the possibility of more storminess and possibility of snow in many parts of the northern U.S. later next week going into the Christmas weekend. Again, a very volatile pattern here showing up by the end of next week into the following weekend. This happens to be the Christmas Eve forecast map for Saturday, December 24th. Quite an impressive deep upper level low showing up even on the ensemble run a week and a half away. Well, let's kind of focus on the short term. Again, we have a major storm system that over the weekend, earlier this week, produced some heavy snow, contributed to a heavy snowfall over the Sierra Nevada in eastern California and the southern Cascades, and some spots in the Sierra Nevada had as much as 5 or 6 feet of snow over the past weekend. Here we are as we begin the day on Tuesday, and that low pressure area has moved from the west into the central plains, and snow is accumulating right now across eastern Wyoming, Montana, spreading into northwestern part of Nebraska and the Dakotas, an all-out blizzard over the next 12 to 24 hours or so across the northern plains. And as I mentioned earlier, severe weather has already broken out in parts of Oklahoma and Texas. That severe weather threat will shift to the east to the lower Mississippi Valley. Notice as we begin the day, we have a flow of air right out of the Gulf of Mexico into the Mississippi Valley. These black lines represent lines of equal pressure. Winds tend to flow parallel to those lines with low pressure centered right here. Winds blow counterclockwise around lows, and that is bringing some warm, moist air, kind of feeding fuel to the atmosphere for severe weather in the south central states, the lower Mississippi Valley, and that will extend into the Tennessee Valley later today into tonight. Now, let's move forward here. That storm system, the initial storm system, moves very slowly to the north and east. It's already feeling the effects of that high latitude blocking over central and northern Canada. Here we are now later in the day today, very strong winds, blizzard conditions from Nebraska up across the Dakotas into Minnesota at this particular time. And again, watch out. This is a squall line here later today into tonight. It could produce some isolated tornadoes, not only in Texas and Oklahoma, but later on in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, later on today, tonight, into the day on Wednesday. And by this time, early Wednesday morning, the heavy snow will start to break out not only in Minnesota, but into the northern half of Wisconsin, along with some ice. And again, this initial surface low can't move very far to the north and east. Here we go now into early Thursday morning. The primary low, which right now is over the Central Plains, only can move to the western Great Lakes, the upper part of the Midwest, again, all as a result of that high latitude block and the negative NAO over central Canada. This is the extent to the north and east this initial low will go. Meanwhile, by Thursday, low pressure will start to form along the eastern seaboard, intensify over the Delmarva Peninsula. And remember, we talked about that high pressure ridge in place across south central and southeastern Canada. That is the supply of cold air that will be in place Thursday morning when precipitation breaks out. And notice all this purple. That represents the possibility of sleet, freezing rain right in the D.C. metro region in the wee hours of the morning. I expect it to begin maybe 3, 4 in the morning as some kind of a wintry mix, probably ice, maybe more sleet than freezing rain initially, but then sleet, freezing rain, and even some snow. could be quite an icy mess in time for the Thursday morning commute in D.C. That moves to the north and east into the Philadelphia suburbs by, let's say, mid-morning on Thursday. Again, a wintry mix expected, and doesn't reach the New York City metro area until maybe midday on Thursday. And by that time, could be a little bit warmer, so maybe a less of a chance of a wintry mix in New York City because of the timing of the precipitation arriving midday Thursday as compared with, let's say, D.C., where it arrives the coldest time of the night, late night, early morning hours. But ultimately, enough milder air flows in off the ocean with southeast to east winds here so that D.C., Philadelphia, New York City ultimately become plain rain, and certainly can be some heavy rain late Thursday in those I-95 urban areas late Thursday night, and some strong easterly winds. You see low pressure area right here along the Delmarva Peninsula. Again, the initial primary low stuck in place here over the western Great Lakes, and secondary forms. And because it's along the coast, maybe even a bit inland, it's just not in the perfect position for a snowstorm, let's say, across the immediate I-95 corridor region. You would like to see that surface low 50 to 100 miles off the coast for colder air to be all the way to the I-95 corridor region and to the coastline. Having said that, you go upstate Pennsylvania, upstate New York, interior New England, this will become quite a snowstorm later Thursday night into the early morning hours on Friday. Again, here's that surface low right over the Delmarva Peninsula. From that position, enough milder air will cause a change over to plain rain, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. It'll be a struggle, though, to get north of, let's say, I-80 across east central Pennsylvania. Certainly the Poconos, lower Hudson Valley, upstate New York, upstate Pennsylvania can get some significant snowfall out of this system. And here we go all the way into Friday morning. Low pressure right along the mid-Atlantic coastline, and that snow extending up into the interior parts of New England by Friday morning. So a lot going on, not only over the next few days, but later next week. Expect an Arctic invasion into the U.S. from way up in Canada, dropping down into the northwestern part of the U.S. and sliding slowly to the south and east, finally reaching the eastern U.S. late next week, going into the Christmas weekend. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, I'm meteorologist